And in this moment, we just offer you praise. We thank you that everyone in this room is fearfully and wonderfully made, and that you have molded us and you have given us value and you've given us purpose. And we just thank you so much for this space to just worship you, Lord. I pray, Lord, that you just continue to be here with us tonight. Just fill this room with anticipation, with your spirit, and just continue to speak to us, Lord. And we just thank you so much that you have met us here tonight, and just continue to be with us. Let's just sing that one more time. All praise
is to the one who made it all, who made it all. All praises to the one who made it all and finds it beautiful.
Amen. Amen. I'm so glad you guys could be here. Who is excited to be here tonight? Amen. I love Zach with all my heart. Oh, man. That was amazing. Let's give a round of applause just for the worship team. That was awesome. I'm so excited. Just for tonight, I'm excited. It feels good to be back. It really does. Let's not take a break like that again. That was too long. But man, I'm so excited to be here tonight. So as we get started tonight, I think that what I want to do is I just want to share with you guys something about myself that I think is vital to understanding and knowing who I am. I love to tell jokes. At one time in my life, I thought maybe stand-up comedy was the life for me, but unfortunately, I'm just up here instead. But I love it, and that's one thing you know with me. I love to joke. I love to laugh. And if you ever around my family for any extended period of time, you'll find that my family as well. We all like to laugh, and we like to crack jokes, usually at the expense of each other's feelings, causing irrevocable emotional damage, but anything for a good joke. And so the reason I want you guys to know that is because I like to joke, and so one thing I really like is I like memes. Do you guys know what memes are? Yes. They're sort of like pictures that say funny things, and so I live for the meme. Right now, my personal favorite are the Harambe memes. I don't know if you guys have any seen those memes. Harambe is a gorilla that was tragically shot down in Cincinnati. But I love those memes. Me and my friend Bobby, we just send those memes back and forth to each other. But another meme that I like, and maybe you guys have seen them circulating, has any of you guys seen the 90s kids memes? Something only 90s kids will remember. That's what the meme is. And so what it means to be a 90s kid, I'll explain it to you in a nutshell in case you don't really understand. So a 90s kid is basically anyone that was born in the 90s, grew up in the 90s, had a portion of their life in the 90s, and I am one of these 90s kids. And so I love these memes because they're really hilarious. And so for any of you guys that were part of the 90s, or maybe I forgot, the 90s were characterized by a number of different things. The times are rapidly changing. Technology was growing. And so things changed in the 90s. That was the biggest thing. And so it was always fads, right? One thing after another after another. So there were some big things back then. There was Dunkaroos. You guys know Dunkaroos? I love the Dunkaroo. And back then, like, there was no really internet. There was no cell phones. There was no cell phones back then. Can you guys imagine a world with no cell phones? Hell, right? We didn't have cell phones back then. We had MSN, late 90s, early 2000s. And that was the way to communicate. If you had a crush, MSN was the way to go. Yeah, you can change your name to, like, I love so-and-so, and that's how true feelings are really shared, was MSN. And there were so many things in the 90s. Boy Meets World, one of my favorite shows back then. A few of you guys. I could go on and on. The 90s, what a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. And so, if anything, I'm going to ask a question. Where are my 90s people at? Okay, that's like almost everyone. Even if you're old, you were around in the 90s. It's all right. No worries. So, because technology times are rapidly changing, one of the things, the struggles of being someone that grew up in this era was you were always trying to keep up with the latest fads. I don't know if you guys ever experienced that in school, but in my school, that's what happened. You'd buy brand new Pokemon cards, then all of a sudden Digimon is the latest thing. You'd be into Beanie Babies, and all of a sudden people are bringing Furbies to school. And you can never quite keep up in the 90s. The fads were always changing. You always felt like you were one step behind. And as a result, you kind of always felt like you didn't have enough because you needed to have the latest, greatest thing. So I have a question for you guys. Does any of you guys know what Beyblades are? Okay, better than I thought. In my school at a time, Beyblades swept the nation. For those of you guys that don't know what Beyblades are, these are Beyblades. So essentially what Beyblades are they're these tops that you put on this device, and what you do is you load it all up, and then but that's not, you don't just rip it. You got to say, let it rip! And then you rip it, and what these Beyblades do, then you battle each other. And so it was like a battle royale in these things, and it was crazy times because kids would come to school with these Beyblades and all these things, and the battles were so intense. Brennan, we went to school together. He knows Beyblades. Did you have Beyblades? Oh yeah, Brennan. Brennan was one of those guys who was kind of always ahead of the fads. You hated Brennan as a kid because he's always, not in a good way, you hated him with love. But like, he was the first one to get a cell phone, and everyone has those in the school, they're the first, and so you're trying to keep up with these people. So, but I love Brennan, we were actually very good friends. I didn't hate him. So, Beyblades were the fad in school, and so naturally, I was like, Mom, I need a Beyblade. I was like, I need Beyblades, otherwise I'm going to be the biggest loser in the whole school. And she would always constantly say no. I wasn't ever too sure why. And I'd beg, and she'd say, no, you're not getting Beyblades. I don't know if she thought they were too violent or something, because they did crash into each other, but she would never get me these Beyblades. And so we'd beg, and I'm just falling behind in school. Everyone's with their Beyblades. I'm just a loser over here. And so one day, me and my brother were out shopping with my mom, and for some reason, we decided to ask again. We said, hey, Mom, can we get some Beyblades? And she's like, fine. She's like, you can get Beyblades, but only if the store has them. And so like, okay, well, the store must have them. Everyone has Beyblades. This is the latest, greatest thing. And so she takes us to the store. It's not Walmart. It's not Toys R Us. It's not Zellers. It's some weird, sketchy store. It's like all black, then there's one old man working there. And I'm like, Mother, where did you find this place? Where are we? It's nowhere near where we live. We're there at this place. And so we go in there, and there's just one old man working there, and we're like, so you got any Beyblades? And this guy has never heard of Beyblades in his life. He's like, could you explain them? And I'm like, they're tops. You let it rip, and battle each other. And he thinks for a second. He's like, yeah, I got something like that. And so we're excited. We're like, okay, we're getting Beyblades. And so he comes back with these things, these tops. They're not Beyblades. They're spinning tops. And I'm like, what the? I'm like, Mom, where did you take us? Where are these things? And my mom sees the price tag. It's ultra cheap, and she's like, sold. We'll take one for him, one for him. And I'm like, oh, gosh. And so she buys the Beyblades because of the cheapest thing. They're not Beyblades, sorry, these tops, these spinning tops. And so me and my brother, we take them home. And we're like, okay, we got to test these things out, see what we're dealing with here. And we get home, we take them out, and we look at these things. And Beyblades have these cool let it rip things. The things that my mom bought us, they were like, it's like this. This is what it looks like. And you put the top on here, you twist it, and you press a button. And the top goes straight down, and it just spins. It did spin for quite a long time, I'll let you know. But these things were not Beyblades. These were not Beyblades, but these were all we had. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, I was like, this is all we got. We'll make do with what we make do. And so we go to school the next day. You guys know that feeling where you think something's going to be really bad, and then you get there and it's actually worse? That's kind of what I experienced then. Yeah, it wasn't pretty for our things. If the tops, they spun for a long time. But unless someone didn't hit it, if anything hit it, it's exploding. Right? These tops are not built for battle like Beyblades. They're not built for combat. And we had these tops, these stupid little toppers. Everyone's letting it rip. Beyblades have accessories. There's metal rings. And in that moment, I had this overwhelming feeling that what I had was not enough. The toys that I had was not enough. And so the reason I want to start with this story, this humorous story, is because I think that although it's just a story, I think it's a feeling that a lot of times we deal with, this idea that what we have is not enough, that what we have is not adequate. Because much like 90s kids always trying to keep up with fads, I don't think much in life has changed, right? It's still that constant thing, what do I need to do to be the latest, to be the greatest? What do I need to do to keep up? And for us today, maybe it's not Blades, but maybe it's the iPhone 6S. It's no longer good enough. We need the iPhone 7 because something has told us that we no longer need the headphone jack. And so what our life becomes is constantly us trying to catch up, us trying to fill ourselves with things so we feel like we are good enough. And it's more than just material things. It's relationships, it's friendships, it's money, it's our job. I think that all of us at some point in our lives, no matter what it is, have dealt with this idea and this feeling that what we have is not enough. And so what I want to speak about tonight is I want to speak about that feeling of not having enough. Because I think often in life, whenever you feel that you do not have enough of something, no matter what it is, eventually these thoughts and these feelings will creep into you that you are not enough. And so what I want to do tonight is I want to speak to this idea of fulfillment. Can you guys all say fulfillment? Fulfillment. And so what I want to talk about is this idea that a lot of us have is where we spend our lives chasing something, whether that be people, possessions, whatever it is, chasing something that we hope will bring us satisfaction, that we hope will bring us joy. And so what I want to do tonight is I want us to be able to see exactly where satisfaction comes from. I want us to see exactly what we need and what we don't need in order for us to have this feeling of fulfillment. And so what I want to do tonight is I want to look at a story found in 1 Kings chapter 17. 1 Kings chapter 17. It's going to be on the screen. There's also Bibles in front of you if you guys want to follow along. And so in order for us to understand this story tonight, I need to give you guys a little bit of a background of what is happening at this time in this story. So 1 Kings is in the Old Testament, and what happened in the Old Testament was that there was these people called the Israelites. And the Israelites, they were kind of God's homies. These were God's people, and they were kind of like the Christians, the people that were supposed to follow God. And so what had happened in this story is that there was a king of Israel. And what has happened in this story is that the king has led the people astray. The leader has led the people astray. And so the leader, what he's supposed to do is lead people to God and all these good things. But instead, what he has done is he's erected these idols. These idols. And specifically this guy named Baal. Can you guys say Baal? Baal, like kind of like I need to get bailed out of something. And his name was Baal. And so specifically this god in this story, he was known as this storm god. So what people thought Baal did was he controlled all the storms. And so that's where we are in this story. There's this storm god, there are these people. And so God sends a prophet named Elijah. And so back then, prophets were just people that God would send to deliver messages that he had to say. And so God delivers this message from Elijah to tell to the king. And it says this, 1 Kings chapter 1, it says, "Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, 'As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word.'" So essentially what has happened here is God is saying, oh, you think Baal controls the weather? You think Baal is the God that controls the weather? Well, I'm going to show you storm God. And so God says, for the next little while, it's not going to rain. Because sometimes what happens in life is the things that we think are in control, sometimes they get taken away, so God can show that those things never had real control. And that's what happens in this story. The people thought this God, Baal, was in control of the rain, but God says, let me show you who's really in control of the rain. And so there's this drought. There's this great drought for 3 years in the land. And so as this drought goes on, Elijah goes into hiding. Elijah, he says the message, and he's like, peace out, right? He's like, I'm the bearer of bad news, I gotta go. And so he hides for 3 years, and eventually God comes to him again, and he's like, Elijah, he's like, I need you to go to this widow's house in this place called Zarephath. These are old biblical names. I'm sorry for how I can't say anything else. In case you're wired, like, why are there all these big words here? The place is called Zarephath. I can barely pronounce it. But this is where this widow lives, is Zarephath. And Elijah says, go there. And what you need to know is Zarephath was not part of Israel's nation, and so the people who lived there, they would not have followed God. They would have followed this same Canaanite god, Baal. And so Elijah is sent there, and he arrives at the widow's home, and he says this. It says this in chapter 17, verse 10. It said, "So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, 'Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?' As she was going to get it, he called, 'And please bring me a piece of bread.' 'As surely as the Lord lives,' she replied, 'I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home, that I may make meal for myself and my son, and we may die.'" So what we learn from this verse is a few things. Number one, like I said, the drought has affected this woman, and it's affected the whole land. And it's affected this lady to the point of death. She's running out of food. She only has a little bit left. She's going to die because this drought is so great. And so Elijah comes to the scene, and he's like, "Yeah, I understand you're hungry, but I need you to make me some food." And at first glance, it kind of seems like Elijah's almost being insensitive, right? Like, this lady's dying. She barely has any food. And he's like, "Hey, can you make me some bread?" And it almost doesn't make sense, but I think there's a deeper reason that Elijah is asking these questions. There's a deeper reason that he's asking her for bread. Because sometimes in life, guys, the questions that we are asked, they have deeper meaning. Sometimes we are asked people questions to get to the root of problems. And so the reason I think Elijah asks for her to get bread is because he wants to get to a root of a deeper problem. Because from the onset, this story appears to be about food, about a lady who doesn't have enough food. But what I want to suggest tonight is I believe this story is about fulfillment. I believe this story is about someone and some lady who doesn't have fulfillment in her life. Jesus, he talks about this story in the New Testament in Luke chapter 4. We're going to skip over there just because I think Jesus kind of, he's backing up what I'm saying. Luke chapter 4 says this. It says, "I assure you," and this is Jesus talking, "there were many widows in Israel in Elijah's time when the sky was shut for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine throughout the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow in Zarephath, in the region of Sidon." And so I need you guys to understand what Jesus is saying here. He's saying there were a lot of people who didn't have food. There were a lot of people who were struggling with this drought. But specifically, God did not send Elijah to any of them. He didn't send Elijah to his own people. He sent Elijah to this woman who knew nothing about him. And the reason that I believe he did that is because God wanted to show this woman who he was. And God wanted to show this woman where fulfillment came from. Because for this lady and most of Israel, they had been looking to this god Baal for fulfillment, hoping that Baal would be the ones who would bring rain, be the ones who would bring food. And so the reason that Elijah goes to her is because I believe that Elijah wants to show her where fulfillment comes from. And so this leads me to my first point, friends. This idea of fulfillment, this idea that we do not have enough. I really believe with my heart the reason that we struggle with these feelings is because often we are looking for fulfillment in the wrong places. We are looking for fulfillment in things that will never truly fill us up. In this story, this lady was looking for satisfaction and fulfillment from rain, from this Baal god who would bring rain for her food. And so she was looking for fulfillment in the wrong places. And I believe that a lot of times in life, what we do is we look for fulfillment in idols. And I may be saying, what is an idol? It's a big, weird word. The best definition for an idol I found online was this. An idol is a mere image or semblance of something visible but without substance. So when I say idols, what I mean by that, I don't mean gold statues. I don't mean whatever an idol may think to your mind. I believe that we look for satisfaction in idols. And when I say that, I mean we're looking for satisfaction in something that appears to be something, but really there's actually no substance in it. And so in this story, she was looking for satisfaction in an idol. I want to ask you guys a question. How many of you guys have ever really wanted something badly in your life before? A few of us. I think in my life I can think of many, many examples. But specifically last year, I wanted something really, really badly. For myself, the instant when I probably wanted something the most bad was last year when I got my brand new car. I got a new car last year. I'll have you guys know, before my new car, I was still driving in luxury. I had a 2001 Saturn. There we go. A few of you guys appreciate true art. But that's what I had before. But I love that Saturn, but that Saturn always caused me problems. I always kind of had to fix it up. And so one day this guy was talking to me, and he's like, like now is the best time to get a new car in your life. Like you're kind of financially stable, you're living at home. It's almost an oxymoron. He's like, buy a new car. Debt? What's debt? Never a better time. And so I was like, you know what, you're right, I do need a new car. I'm going to get a brand new car. And so in that moment when you think you're going to get something, do you guys know like that moment when you think you're going to get it and you now have to have it? I have it a lot. And so I had it for this car. And I looked online, I'm comparing gas prices, mileage, all these things. And the car that drew my attention was the Mazda 3. My gosh, what a car. And this was the car I was going to get from the moment I saw it. And so what I did, I went to dealerships. I was looking for the best price, all these things, but I knew I wanted this car, and I had to have this car. And so after negotiation, I finally got the deal I wanted, and I got my brand new 2015 Mazda 3, leather seats. I'm not bragging. The Lord blesses. But I finally got this car, and I tell you guys something. When I got that car, man, for the first few weeks, when I would see that car in my garage, when I would step into that car, it brought me literal and actual pure joy. And not even when I was driving the car, I would just look at the car and I'd be like, oh gosh, it's mine. Like, that thing is beautiful. And this is how it was for a long time, and I love that car. And let me preface, I still love that car. It's in the parking lot right now. It's a beautiful piece of mechanics. But what I want to illustrate is this. Those feelings that I had a year ago for that car, I no longer have those same feelings. I still love my car because it gets me from A to B. It's still an amazing car, but that car no longer brings me joy when I see it because it's just my car. It's just something I have. My car no longer gives me that satisfaction. I no longer stare at it in amazement because the longer I had it, the more normal it becomes. And I think that all of us can agree because we've had things in our lives. Maybe it's our new iPhones, right? We have it for a while and it's amazing, but after time it fades, right? And I think we can all agree that we've had instances in our lives where something we thought was so amazing, it eventually has faded. And these things are what I'm illustrating when I say idols. They're things that appear to have substance, but really at the root of it, there's nothing. No matter what, that car cannot bring me true joy, true satisfaction. And I can tell you this, I've met many people with nicer cars than me. I've met many people with nicer stuff than me, but I've never met someone who has said, you know what, my car, it really fulfills me. My life is complete from my car. My life is complete from my house. I've never met someone who said that before in their lives. Because what I'm saying is that oftentimes these things in our lives that we think are so good, that we think they're so cool, that this is what we need. We think that we need these things, but often after time, it fades. It fades. And the problem is, these things that we want so badly, these things that we think that we need, we look to them to give us value. Well, if I just have a new car, then I'll have value. Then people will see who I am. If I'm just getting that relationship, if I have a boyfriend or girlfriend, then I will have true value. Then someone will value me. Whatever it is, when we look to these things for value, that is where the trouble becomes. Because what I believe to be true is this, friends. When we look to things for value in our lives, we will never have enough. Because when you judge or base value on appearance, you will never have enough. You will always need more. You will always need the latest and greatest thing because all these things are temporary. And so what I believe, and what I'm saying, guys, is this, that we often look for satisfaction in the wrong places. We look for satisfaction in things that are only temporary. And that is what happens in this story. I want to tell you guys a funny story. It just came to my head. How many of you guys have Snapchat? Did you guys, and this is my own psychological analysis of life. I'm not a doctor. I can barely say big words. But my dad's a doctor, so that's pretty close. But I think a lot of times in life, Snapchat stories, I'm not dissing you guys because I know there's a lot of Snapchatters in here. I think a lot of times in life, we Snapchat simply to give ourselves value. Did you guys know that? We Snapchat so people know what we're doing. I'm only Snapchatting so y'all know I'm having a good time tonight. I got a Snapchat right now. I'm with people. I'll tell you guys a funny story. The reason I want to say this. Me and Kristen, my wife, we went on our honeymoon. And this one night, there was like this party on the beach. And it wasn't very happening. There was like 10 people there. But it had lights and it had music, so it appeared that it was happening. And I saw this one guy, and he was Snapchatting himself. And he had the perfect angle where you couldn't really see anything. It was right above him. There's just lights and music. And he's Snapchatting, he's going like this. And so I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, man, when his friends see that story, they're going to think he has the most awesome life there is. They're going to think he's having the best time ever. But what I realized is I saw him from the outside. He wasn't having a good time. He was by himself, just dancing like an idiot. But this is what happens in life, friends. The reason I think that we do, and we crave these things, we crave likes on Facebook, we crave likes on Instagram, we crave these Snapchat stories being viewed, and the reason we do that is because we get our value from these things, from people seeing that we do these things. But what I'm saying is this, friends, and if any of you have ever done it in your life, you will know this: it is temporary. And when you do that, you will never be enough. Your picture will never get enough likes. You will never get enough reposts. Your Snapchat stories will never get enough views. And so, what I'm saying, and this is my first point, and I think it's vital, is that if we want true fulfillment in our lives, we can't be looking to find fulfillment in idols, in things that are only temporary, because temporary things will always fade. There will always be new fads, always something new. And if our value is based on these things, we will constantly be chasing. And when you chase these things, you will never be enough. And so the reason that Elijah comes to this widow is simply to show her, first and foremost, where fulfillment comes from, because fulfillment was not coming from this idol god, Baal. And so as we pick back up the story, he says this. He says that, go get me some bread, please. And this is what she says. This is her response. Again, she says, "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug." And so this woman is near death. She has very little bit, and she's looking to this Canaanite god Baal for fulfillment, and she's not finding it, and what she has appears to be slowly dwindling. But what I think that oftentimes we might miss in this story as we read it is that she said this: she has a handful of flour and a little olive oil. And so, if you're not picking up, the problem in life, number one, we try to find fulfillment in things that won't bring us fulfillment. But number two, oftentimes there's this idea that what we have isn't enough. And in this story, this woman is saying, "I don't have anything." But what this verse is saying is that she actually has something. She still has a little bit. And so my second point is this, friends. Everyone has something. A lot of times in life, the reason that we do these things, these crazy things, is because we believe that we do not have enough. We believe that we are not enough. But my second point, what I believe God wants us to understand today, is that every one of us has something. No one in life is born empty-handed. The problem that happens in life is this: we become so focused on what we don't have that we always miss out on what we do have. Did you guys know that? The more that you focus on what you don't have, what you are lacking, you will always miss out on the gifts that God has given us. And oftentimes, I'll tell you guys a story about myself. I like to speak. I'm up here. Speaking's cool. It's a good time. But I have other dreams as well. I'm a dreamer. And one of my other dreams is I'd like to sing and play guitar. You guys saw Brendan up here? My dream is to be that, but better. Where's Brendan? Oh, there he is, my man. I really wish I could be a rock star. And worship's cool. I love worship. But my biggest dream, I love Coldplay. I wish Coldplay would recruit me and I could play in their band. That's my biggest dream. I wish I could play in front of millions and millions of people. But there's a problem with my dreams and what I want of being a musician. I got two things going against me. Number one, the first thing going against me is I was not born or blessed with rhythm. I have no rhythm. Maybe, I don't even know what I walk like. Maybe I'm off rhythm. But sometimes during songs, I'm clapping and Christy tells me to stop. She's like, "You're way off beat. You're not even close." I love guitar. I legitimately can't strum. My head can't, it doesn't work. And so I have these dreams, but the problem is I don't quite have the talents. And I'm going to tell you guys something. I truly and honestly believe this with my whole heart. I believe that some people are born with talents that other people don't have. I think some people are born more inclined to things than other people. Unfortunately, I was not musically gifted from birth. I really wish I was. But here's the thing. Because although I believe that people are born with different gifts and other gifts, if I were to so much focus on this fact that I can't play music, and if I let that completely crumble me, I would miss out on the gifts that God has given me. Because you guys better believe God has blessed me in other areas. Charm, charisma. If you guys don't know me, I'm not a bad person. I just make jokes sometimes. But the point is this. When we complain, when we focus on what we don't have, you will always miss out on what God has given you. What God has given you, what God has blessed you with. Because there's people in this room who have talents that no one else has, that have abilities that no one else has. I have talents that y'all don't have. But you guys have talents I don't have. And the problem is when we focus on what we don't have, we always miss out on what we have. And here's the problem with that. You guys want to know the biggest problem? When we complain about what we don't have, is that there is someone out there right now who is praying, who is working their butt off to get to the point where you were born with that. There's someone working day in and day out just to get to the point where you already have and you put no work into it. And so when we complain, and when have you guys ever been around a complainer when they're complaining about something? You're like, man, I only wish I could do that, right? And I've done it in my life too. But the fact of the matter is, our focus, when we focus on what we don't have, we miss out on the gifts that God has given us. And I believe that this woman, even though she had a very little bit, she was missing out on the little bit that she had. And so I told you guys there's two reasons I'm not a musician. Number one, I'm not physically born with it, the talents, the abilities. But number two is I have no intention of putting time in to become a musician. I'm not going to work for it. I really don't want to. I want to be a musician. I don't want to work for it. And I think that's the problem a lot of us have in life is we would like certain things. We would like to do certain things, be certain places, but we don't want to put the work in to do it. And although I believe that certain people are more inclined for certain things, I honestly believe from the bottom of my heart, if I were to work my butt off, I could be up here and play. I really do. And I believe in you guys as well. In whatever you want to do, if you put the work in, I believe that you could do it. Anyone can do it. No one is born with this handicap where you can't do something. But we handicap ourselves when we complain, especially when we're not willing to put in the work to actually do something. We complain about things and we're not willing to actually put the work in. And so those are the two reasons. Like I said, I want to do these things. I may not be inclined, but I also don't want to put the time in. And so when we have these things and we complain about what we don't have, we will always miss out on the something that God has given us. And we're talking about this idea of fulfillment, this idea of being fulfilled. And so what I'm trying to understand and illustrate through all my ADD and different tracks my brain's going right now is that God has given each and every one of you something. No one in this room was born empty-handed. And what I want you guys to see tonight is the something that God has given you. The little, no matter how little it is, I believe that God has given you guys something. I was reading this week about an experiment done with lab rats. Lab rats seem to always get the short end of the stick in terms of their lives because they're always experimented on. I don't know where the animal activists are on that one, but I was reading about this experiment this week, and essentially what they did was this. They had these rats, and there's two rats. And number one, the rat that they did is they put him in a jar of water in complete darkness. So the rat couldn't see a thing. And what happened in this experiment is the rat swam and it swam for all of 3 minutes before it gave up and it died. Poor rat. And the second rat, what they did, same experiment, they put him in a jar, but they gave him this ray of light so he could still see something. And this rat, it swam for 36 hours straight, more than 700 times longer than the rat who couldn't see anything. And so what I'm saying, the reason I'm trying to illustrate to you guys is this point that when we can see something, our lives will be so much different than when we see nothing. For a lot of us, our lives, we just look at it and say, man, I have no hope. I have no talents. What do I have? And when we do that, it's so easy to give up hope. It's so easy to believe that we are not enough, to believe that we are failures. But what I want each and every one of you guys in this room to understand is that you have something. And when you understand that you have something, I promise you that your life will begin to look so much different. Because when we have hope in our lives, when we see what God has given us, we begin to live differently. We begin to see where fulfillment comes from. Because this is what I believe to be true, friends. I could sit up here with the cliche and tell you that fulfillment comes from God. And I truly believe it does. But I also believe that there is something in having stuff. I believe that God wants us to have good stuff. God wants us to have things. God would love for us to have a good car, a good house. But the problem is, when we look for satisfaction in things, these are only a shadow of who God is. God wants us to search for Him. The things that He gives us, His blessings, these are a shadow of Him, a shadow of His character. And He says, if you follow me, I will give you these things. But often we look to the shadow to give us fulfillment. We look to these temporary things to give us fulfillment. And so the point is, and I've said it so many times, that each and every one of you has something. And when we can look into our lives and see that we have something, I promise you will start to live differently. When you start to realize that just having a phone means you are blessed, when just being able to go to school means you are blessed, when just the fact that you can walk, you are blessed, when we start to see these things in our lives, we will live so much more different. And this is what I want to show you as I wrap up here. So Elijah wants to show her that she has something. 1 Kings 17, verse 13 says this. It says, don't be afraid. She's like, I don't have anything. He says, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said, but first make a small loaf of bread from what you have and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on His land. And so the message that God sends her is simply this. He says, take the little bit that you have and give it to me. Essentially what He's saying is not about what you have. It's not about what you don't have. It's about what I have given you. And God says, give me the little you have, and I will make it, and I will sustain it day after day after day. And so my final point is this, friends. With God, I didn't skip ahead, my bad. With God, a little bit is a lot. And this is what I want to illustrate. This is why I want you guys to see that everyone has something. Because when you can hone in on that something that you have, that something that God has given you, God will turn that little into a lot. God will turn your little talents into something great. And for this woman, He says, give me what you have, and I promise you that you will never run dry. And so as I started, I talked about this idea of idols and putting our hope into things that are temporary, those things that don't have substance. And so what I'm saying, guys, is what I want you to do is the little that you have, give it to God. Give the little that you have to God, and I promise you, you will see how He will use what you have. Last verse says this. It says, she went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and from her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word the Lord spoke through Elijah. And so, friends, what I'm saying is this. If there's someone out there, any of you guys out there have been putting your trust into things, and you find that no matter what you put yourself into, you still don't feel like you're enough. No matter what you've been chasing day after day after day, and you come back at the end of the day and it's the same every single time. And you're like, man, how come I don't feel full? How come I feel this way? What I'm saying is I want you guys to give what you have and give it to God. Because for those, if you guys don't know what God's all about, I'm going to tell you what God's all about right now. God is a God who wants to take little and He wants to take it a lot. And He wants to take a little and He wants to make it a lot. The God that I serve, the God that I know, is a God that wants to give you a life and a life overflowing. A life not of temporary things, but of eternal things and things that will last forever. And so my appeal to you guys today is simple. I just want you guys to take what God has given you, and I just want you guys to see what God can do with it. Because I promise you, God can do something amazing, something that you couldn't imagine. I've given the little that I have to God, and God has done things I can never imagine. I never imagined I could be up here speaking. I never imagined half the things that I've done. But what I've seen in my life over and over and over again is that when I give to God what He has given me, He multiplies it and He does something that I could never imagine. And so for anyone in this room who is wondering what God is all about, who is God? God is a God that takes a little and turns into a lot. God doesn't ask for a lot from you. God doesn't ask you to be perfect. God just asks you to be you, and He says, come here. He's like, let's do something crazy. Let's make magic. And that's who God is. And that's the God that we want to show you guys here at Altitude. And so as I close tonight, friends, I just want you guys to realize that every single one of you in this room can experience fulfillment. No one in this room has to feel empty. No one in this room has to feel like you are not enough. Because of what God has done for us, God is saying you are more than enough. No matter what, you are more than enough. And God has given every one of you guys something. So I want to encourage you and I want to empower you. And so right now I want to stand and I want to praise God one last time with the worship team. So if you guys could just join me, we're going to sing one more song.